Hi, brothers and sisters. I'm going to pick up where we left off. My name is Michelle. This is the second part to the proof for the existence of God, number 65. And the title of this particular proof is called Mitochondrial Eve and Y-Chromosome Atom. Okay, let's get started. So yes, it doesn't make any sense. How could there be rapid change from an ape shape to a human shape and then no change? The theory of evolution predicts slow and gradual change. Scientists say there is no difference between humans today and 200,000 years ago. In order to get humans from monkeys in 4,800,000 years, there has to be a lot of rapid changes, and that violates the theory of evolution. Thirdly, genetic scientists are accepting that we all are descendants of one man and one woman. This makes sense because it's not likely that mutation could have produced identical advances or genetic advantages in two different and distinct lineages, nor in very distant locations. All of us have 3 billion codes in our DNA makeup. So random mutation will never produce the same mutated human beings in two different locations. But if we are all descendants of one male and one female, how could a supposed evolutionary change take place in one individual and then that new trait be spread throughout the whole population of humans? The only way that can work is if all descendants without the new trait die off and only descendants with the new trait survive. Therefore, a new common ancestor would be needed every time a new trait emerged. And it would take not just a new Eve, but it would presumably require a new Adam for each change, which makes sense. Let's try to think of how we humans could evolve from today. Then I think you'll see this is impossible. I would maintain that it would be equally impossible to have happened in all the populations in the past. Let's just suppose that someone was born who had mutated hugely in one generation, not the Darwinian slow and gradual way, so that this person would clearly be the fittest to survive. Think of the X-Men movie, for example. Just to pick an example, let's say this X-Man person has a super Einstein brain. You can make up your own mutated trait if you like, for your own example to imagine. Let's call him Xavier, this X-Man again, for reference purposes. Also, we could use she Xavier if you prefer an example using women. Our goal is that all human beings at some point in the future have this new mutated trait, super Einstein brain. That would mean that Xavier must become the ancestor at some point in the distant future of all the humans alive on the planet. Those without the new trait, without a super brain, must become extinct. What would have to happen, and how long would it take? This mutated characteristic, a super Einstein brain, would have to be able to be passed on to Xavier's children. Not all mutations can be inherited, so the odds are challenging. Also, Xavier would have to somehow marry a spouse who is compatible with his mutation being inherited. He might not mate at all, of course. Not all spouses would necessarily reproduce the mutated trait with him, even if they did mate. The odds of all this are not good. But let's keep going. Suppose all of their children had super brains. still, they would also have to intermarry with normal human brains without super brains. There aren't any other humans with the super brains. The genes for super brains would have to be dominant, or they would die out very quickly. There are 7 billion people in the world having children. How long would it take, if ever, before all people in the world would have a super brain? That would mean that all people were descendants of Xavier. We would also have to get to the point that all children being born would have super brains, and the genes for non-super brains are totally gone from the gene pool. Otherwise, some children might be from parents that still carried the non-super brain gene, and the result could be that their children might have ordinary brains. One other major problem is that the human race is spread all over the globe and unto every tiny island. If the mutation occurred to Xavier in Africa, say, how could it possibly spread all over the globe to all the other human groups? It's a little bit crooked. There we go. This seems so absurdly complicated to me that it is impossible. And this is just for one change. If we came from monkeys, we had to go through thousands of changes, if not millions. And Jim says, please read chapter 12 about this, called Chimpanzees. And for more information on the millions of DNA differences between apes and humans, you'll also find in that chapter 12. Fourthly, the idea behind natural selection and survival of the fittest is that each time there is an advance, then it somehow becomes universal among all members of that species in later generations. So for every small advance through the evolution process, and there have been thousands of them, there would have to be an Xavier and a she Xavier to start the species all over again with the new trait. The corollary, of course, is that all the other members of the species without the new advantage are going to die out and leave no descendants. Once there are millions of members of a species, how could there be continuing evolutionary changes that spread to the entire population and don't leave behind a single individual? We know that the DNA of every individual of a species is basically identical. Evolutionists want you to believe that the DNA of some advantageous mutation can be spread exactly as it is to the DNA of every individual in a species at some point in the future. But think about this practically. If mutations were that powerful, which they are not, there would be total chaos in the DNA of every species. Millions of individuals would mean millions of mutations, all vying to change the DNA of the whole species. Fifthly, as we can see, it becomes impossible to explain how such a process, mutated super Einstein brains, could evolve a new human race. However, evolution has a tremendously bigger problem. Evolution is supposed to apply to every other one of the 800,000 species that exist today. Insects, birds, fish, plants, and animals, and even bacteria. Because evolution works magically only when there is reproduction, therefore new traits have to start with an original male and female in every case. So once any significant change takes place, you would have to start all over again with another original male and female who mate with each other, or at least somehow become a common ancestor of the whole species later on. There are so many major changes between species that this process of starting over with a new couple would have to be repeated hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of times. And Jim says, okay, please read proof number 64 in his book, which is called Missing Links, okay? All birds, fish, animals, and all living beings would have to evolve by this process, not some magic. That doesn't make any sense. There is not enough time in history for this to work. And there is no such fossil record of it ever happening. The only theory that is workable is that God created each new species, a male and a female, as unique originals at a point in time. And from there came many variations within the species, but not between the species. Okay? So he says there must be God. All right. That was awesome, Jim. Yeah, thank you so much. Let's take another look. Yeah. Okay, everyone, take care. Right. Bye.